When my husband surprised me with a lakeside vacation rental for the summer, I couldn't have been more thrilled. We'd been needing quality FM Miley time, just me, him and the kids away from the hustle of daily life. The pictures showed an adorable cabin, spacious and private, nestled in the woods right up against a glittering blue lake. It seemed absolutely perfect. The owners mentioned the isolation of the location as a perk. After the noise and crowds of the city, having the lake completely to ourselves sounded idyllic. I imagined languid afternoons paddling canoes, taking in majestic mountain views, and spending warm summer nights stargazing on the tranquil water. We packed up in eager anticipation of a much-needed reset and escape. The first few days exceeded every expectation. The pristine lake was marvelous for swimming, with the kids laughing and playing while my husband and I blissfully floated in the gentle waves. In the evenings we grilled out on the deck, chatting and telling stories as the sky darkened to a tapestry of pinks and purples. With no ambient light for miles, the stars emerged by the millions, shining brilliantly. Around the middle of the week, subtle signs started to unsettle me. Chairs and cushions on the porch seemed slightly rearranged each morning. In the pantry, boxes and cans never looked quite how I'd left them. These subtle changes amplified my imagination. Each unexpected sound or shadow I noticed put me increasingly on edge. Then the food started vanishing. It was little at first, a few crackers here, single pieces of fruit there. Easy to brush off until one morning when I found a whole bundle of wild ramps missing from the fridge. My husband calmed me down, logically pointing out that a hungry raccoon was the culprit, finding clever ways in. But my unease only grew. I started lying awake at night, sharp ears tuned for any abnormal creak or shuffle suggesting something amiss. Late one warm evening, after an idyllic day spent fishing off the dock, the kids went out to play flashlight tag while I cleaned up dinner. Grabbing the broom from the pantry, I froze in my tracks. Tucked behind the shelf, partially obscured in shadow, was a filthy sleeping bag and pile of clothes. Heart lurching, I realized the truth. Someone was clandestinely living in our cabin. Adrenaline surging, I ran to gather the children just as the back door slowly creaked open. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed through the rooms as we huddled in terrified silence. I herded my family upstairs, locking us in the master bedroom, pulse racing. The ominous thudding of boots drew nearer until the intruder jostled the locked door handle. The kids shrieked as the first blow hit, the frame violently quaking. Again and again he threw his weight against it as we cowered in the corner. The wood started cracking, splintering down the middle. Then, the door gave way and a wild-eyed stranger burst into the room. He looked feral, abnormally gaunt in ragged, soiled clothes. Deranged and frenzied, he screamed we were trespassing in his home and had to leave immediately. When I tried reasoning with him, he became incensed. Brandishing a massive hunting knife, he stalked towards us, promising to kill if we didn't vacate right then. My husband and I exchanged a knowing look. We had to distract him. We pleaded and fake negotiated while I fumbled my cell phone, dialing behind my back. The man was utterly unhinged, ranting delusions about this being his property as he chased us from room to room. We hurled objects to block his path, barely staying steps ahead, praying for police to arrive in time. He pursued us up the stairs, backing us into a corner and raising his glinting blade overhead. True terror seized me that this was how we would die, at the hands of a madman in a home that wasn't ours. Just then, red and blue lights flashed outside as shouting voices approached. Thankfully, the police had arrived. They searched the grounds and found evidence of the squatter living on the land in a hidden crawl space for months, even before we'd arrived. He was a dangerous fugitive, long presumed dead, who had completely lost touch with reality. We'd almost become his latest victims. My family left that place immediately, too traumatized to stay another night. Those wild, unhinged eyes staring us down still haunt my thoughts. The kids suffered vivid nightmares for weeks. We sold all our stuff, desperate to start fresh somewhere new. Now we only vacation at crowded resorts. No more isolated cabins in the woods for us, not after almost meeting our demise at the hands of that lake house intruder. It was my first year as a camp counselor at Camp Crystal Lake. I was so excited to spend the entire summer outdoors with kids, teaching them new skills like archery, swimming, and hiking while watching them grow more confident and develop independence. Camp Crystal Lake was known for its lush pine forests, massive sparkling blue lake, and fun outdoor activities. When I first arrived with the other counselors, the camp felt eerily quiet and run down. The log cabins had peeling paint, some with broken windows covered in cobwebs. The paths were overgrown with weeds and the mess hall looked abandoned, with bamboo shoots poking through the sagging roof. The director explained that after a tragic drowning of a young camper named Billy a few years back, the camp fell into disrepair and was closed down. They had tried to reopen it this summer and restore it to its former glory, but clearly much work needed to be done. As he described the drowning incident, a chill went down my spine. I tried to push away the uneasy feelings and focus on getting the camp ready. The first week went relatively smoothly once the campers arrived. Their excited energy seemed to breathe life back into the camp. We kept them busy from 7 a.m. until lights out with activities, and they went to bed tired each night after giggling and sharing stories around the evening campfire. I started to relax and think I had imagined the creepy vibes I felt when I first got there. The kids were having a great time, and that's what mattered. But then strange things started happening. One morning, I arrived to set up the archery equipment, only to discover the bows and arrows smashed and strewn all over the ground. On another day, the entire arts and crafts shed was ransacked, paints opened and dumped out, shelves toppled over. Most chilling was a message written in ash on the exterior wall of the mess hall. "You will pay." We decided not to tell the campers to avoid panicking them, but the counselors were genuinely spooked. It was clear there was a sinister presence lurking around camp sabotaging things, but who or what could it be? The incidents escalated at night, the time I most dreaded. Blood-curdling screams erupted one night from the girls' cabin. We came running to discover trash thrown everywhere, graffiti on the walls, and the girls inside crying hysterically. Through shaky breaths, they said they saw an alarming figure peering in their window after lights out, but then it disappeared. We inspected outside but found no clues in the darkness, but worse was yet to come. One sunny afternoon during swim time, Tommy, one of my 9-year-old campers, vanished without a trace. We searched the camp frantically but only found his abandoned towel on the lakeshore. I knew in my gut that whatever evil presence was haunting this camp had taken him. That night, through the trees, I spotted a flickering light coming from the old boathouse where the counselors stored canoes and kayaks. My heart dropped knowing no one should be there at this hour. Gripping my flashlight tightly, I made my way down the overgrown path to investigate. The dilapidated boathouse creaked in the wind. Spray painted on the exterior were the ominous words, "He must die." I cautiously pulled open the door. There in the corner crouched a large figure, face obscured in shadow. Beside him lay Tommy, unconscious and tied up. My pulse pounded as I took a brave step forward. The figure stood up slowly and turned to face me. The moonlight spilled through the rafters, illuminating his twisted smile. It was Billy, the child who had supposedly drowned in the lake years ago. Only he was no longer a child. It became clear he had survived that tragic swim and had been hiding in these woods, plotting his twisted revenge all these years. We had unknowingly brought our innocent campers right to him to play out his deranged fantasies. As he lurched towards me wielding a rope and hunting knife, I knew I had to get Tommy out of there. Summoning every bit of adrenaline and courage, I charged forward, pushing Billy aside to grab Tommy's limp body. Billy lashed out and sliced my shoulder with the knife, but I managed to escape into the moonlit night. I ran at full speed through the dark woods back to the cabins yelling for help. Within moments, the entire camp was awake and panicked. Tommy started to stir as counselors tended to my bleeding shoulder. The police arrived just in time to see a figure disappearing into the forest. Billy escaping once again. They searched extensively but found no trace of him. We shut down the camp immediately. As we packed up the next morning, I gazed across the vast shimmering lake, knowing Billy was still somewhere deep in the forest surrounding it. A chill went down my spine imagining him sinking silently below the surface here so many years ago, only to survive and let the camp become his own personal hunting grounds. Though we had escaped this time, I knew Billy would be back to continue his twisted games. Our summer at Camp Crystal Lake was over, but his reign of summertime terror was only just beginning. It was supposed to be a carefree guy's getaway. Just me and my buddies renting a cabin in the mountain woods for a week of fishing, grilling, and enjoying some brews away from the stress of work and city life. Little did we know that a simple hike would lead us to an ancient discovery and unleash a chilling nightmare from which we barely escaped. The day started normally enough. After sleeping in late, we made bacon and eggs for a big breakfast to fuel up for a hike. The weather was perfect, sunny and just cool enough to be refreshing without needing jackets. We packed some waters and snacks and headed out on a trail leading uphill through thick forests. Josh brought his vintage pole and tackle box, dreaming of trout for dinner. For a couple hours, we appreciated the pristine scenery, clear mountain air, and each other's company. Eventually, we came across something nestled just off the path. A strange totem half buried in the dirt. It was about 3 feet tall and looked ancient, engraved with twisted humanoid faces, and bizarre symbols worn down by time and weather. We were fascinated and gave each other playfully terrified looks, building up the courage to approach what was clearly some sacred artifact. Tim boldly used his hiking stick to tip the totem over, cracking it open to reveal a smaller fist-sized statue inside. This figure was even more unsettling. Beady eyes seemed to follow you, and a sinister energy radiated from it. But it also seemed rare and unique. After debating whether to leave it undisturbed, our curiosity got the better of us. We carefully placed both pieces in Tim's backpack to examine back at the cabin, feeling a mix of excitement and unease. That evening, we casually tossed back a few beers and theorized about the origins of our strange find. But beneath the surface, tensions were high. Small arguments broke out over mundane things, which was unusual for our normally laid-back group. I had trouble falling asleep that night and was haunted by vivid nightmares of being stalked through the woods by snarling beasts. The others said they also had intense, troubling dreams. It became apparent that by taking the totem, we had invited some dark energy to latch onto us. The next day, Tim took the statue out to examine in daylight. As he turned it in his hands, the surrounding forest sounds quieted. We felt an unmistakable sensation of being watched by some malicious presence. Mark suggested we return the idol to its original site and perform a makeshift ceremony asking forgiveness for disturbing it. We all enthusiastically agreed. We just wanted this ominous cloud hanging over us to dissipate, even if it meant admitting we shouldn't have tampered with forces beyond our understanding. We hiked back to the fateful spot, senses heightened and nerves frayed, while the woods around us seemed eerily silent and still. Every snap of a twig put us on edge. Upon reaching the totem's intended resting place, Tim solemnly replaced both pieces in the indented earth. We each said silent prayers and apologies, hoping that would satisfy whatever spirit watched over this land. But the hike back to the cabin was pure torment. We were certain something lurked just out of eyeshot, toying with us. How desperately we anticipated the reassuring sight of those cabin walls. Yet as soon as we arrived, we could tell our attempt at appeasement had failed. An unnatural chill permeated the air. Over the next 2 days, the paranormal activity amplified. Shadowy figures darted at the periphery of our vision, always vanishing when we whipped our heads around. We took shifts keeping watch at night, though no one could sleep soundly even off duty. Our sparse rest was plagued by vivid nightmares that left us whimpering and gasping for air. Morbid thoughts and paranoia infected our minds. We eyed each other with growing mistrust, terrified the entity would claim one of us next. It became clear that our amateurish ritual had been insufficient. We needed to make a proper offering. At dawn on the third day, we collected wildflowers and herbs and solemnly returned to the totem site. Laying our gifts in a circle around it, we pleaded for this horror to cease. I recited every prayer fragment I could recall from childhood church services and Sunday school. Finally, we turned and hurried away without looking back, determined to leave the malevolent spirit behind for good. The hike down was tense, but as soon as we re-entered the clearing surrounding the cabin, relief washed over us. The heavy, sinister atmosphere had finally lifted. That evening we built a huge bonfire, gave thanks, and reminisced late into the night, spirits lifting as we reconnected. We decided to leave the next morning. I'll forever be grateful we all made it out unscathed. Our childish curiosity unleashed forces we were woefully unprepared for. But we learned our lesson. Ancient things are meant to remain at rest. The unseen world holds powers beyond our control, not to be trifled with. This chilling ordeal taught me respect for the mysteries of life and nature, and it drew out reserves of courage and loyalty in my friends I'll never forget.